Hello and welcome to this short unit called Impact First. My name is Barbara Scheck. Today's session is all about impact. Thinking about impact is essential for social entrepreneurs, so they can know whether they're succeeding or not in creating the social or environmental change they care so deeply about. So on today's agenda is the following. I would like to elaborate on the concept of impact and how it can be defined. Talk a bit about the importance, the why of impact assessment. Give a general overview of methods and tools for social impact assessment. Discuss the challenges and limitations of social impact assessment and give you some practical advice on how to get started. So, what is impact? Impact is defined as the changes that occur in the lives of your target groups or your beneficiaries as a direct result of your intervention. So there must be a cause and effect relationship between what you are doing and the effects these activities have. In order to derive this impact, a model has evolved that's called, based upon the first letters of the specific steps in the assessment, the IOOI model. It starts with your inputs. These are the resources that you are working with, and that can be money, time, for example by volunteers, or so-called in-kind donations. For example, computers or rooms that you have at your disposal and that you're working with. With these resources, you conduct your activities. And you produce certain results, so-called outputs. These outputs can be directly measured either in terms of the number of people that you reach, in terms of the number of activities that you conduct, or in terms of number of institutions that you're working with. Imagine a project that works with young students from migrant families. The objective is to offer them education classes in order to have them better integrated into society and at the very end achieve a more coherent, more consistent, more open, more tolerant society. The outputs in number of peoples reached are the students, the number of students that attend your classes. The outputs in number of activities are the number of classes that you offer to these students. And the outputs in terms of number of institutions are the number of schools that you're working with. And these outputs produce, hopefully, so-called changes, outcomes in the lives of these students. Although the outputs are very important information and parameter, they don't say anything about the real changes that has occurred within the target group. And these changes are the outcomes. That's your actual objective. At the very end, however, you don't only want to make a difference in the life of these students, but you want to change something on the societal level as a whole. And this change that goes beyond the target group, so the changes that occur in the families of these students, in the communities, in society as a whole, these are called the impact. That's the last I in the IOOI model. And as I said at the beginning, there should be a cause and effect relationship between the outputs, the direct results of your activities, and the changes that occur at the level of the target group and as well at the level of society as a whole. Digging a bit deeper how these impacts are achieved, you can use the so-called impact staircase. This model thinks about outputs and outcomes that you generate as a logic chain of steps that you have to pursue, starting with, as the first step, that your activities have occurred as planned. So you can offer your classes the way you envisage them. In a second step, the target groups that you are trying to reach attend these classes and they accept the offer. These are still outputs that then hopefully on level 4 result in the first step of outcomes, so the skill set of this target group changes, and as a consequence of the change in the skill set, the behavior of these children changes. And at level 6, it then alters the life situation that they're in, and as a final step, changes the society that we live in. Please bear in mind that context always matters. So if you illustrate, report, talk about your outcomes and impacts, you should always start with illustrating the social problem in general. So what's the extent of the problem? Who's affected? What are causes and consequences? And then talk about your own approach. So how you are trying to tackle or solve the problem and what you have achieved by means of outputs and outcomes, how that addresses best the problem that you're trying to solve. But why do it at all? Why is impact assessment important? There are two perspectives on that topic. One is the internal perspective. So assessing your impact and being clear about what you're trying to achieve and the results and outcomes and impacts that you've generated so far helps you clarify your own logic model and pays into your strategy and monitoring. It helps you better develop your organization, and it pays into holistic management of your social enterprise. You can then improve the services that you offer because you better know which resources generate what results, and you can better allocate these resources to the activities that are most impactful. From an external perspective, impact assessment can significantly enhance your fundraising chances. It can help you in reporting towards existing investors or donors, and it supports your marketing and public relations efforts. In order to assess the impacts and outcomes, a variety of methods and tools has been developed. It all started roughly 20 years ago with so-called rating systems. So third parties observing, assessing your organization and your activities and determining the impacts that you have achieved. It then developed towards so-called assessment systems, so tools and methods with which social enterprises can themselves quantify or even monitorize the impacts that they have achieved. Nowadays, the trend goes towards holistic management systems, so impact assessment metrics and methodologies that help you to identify the problem, to better understand your own approach, to assess your impacts and outcomes, and use this to really create a more powerful and impactful organization, rather than just having one metric or one indicator or one number to quantify your impact. However, there are certain challenges and limitations to impact assessment. First of all, it's true that you can't manage what you can't measure. However, but at the same time, not everything that can be counted counts. So you should be very careful in selecting the parameters, the indicators, the impacts that you want to measure and that you want to count. Due to the nature of social impact that is long-term, unpredictable, can be very difficult to track. Second of all, impact assessment can be very cost-intensive. So you have to carefully balance the trade-off between the resources that you put into impact assessment and the benefits that you have from the assessment. Third, there's a problem of attribution. Attribution means the way how you can assess that a certain impact can be dedicated or can be attributed to your intervention and not to the activities of somebody else. There are certain methodological issues. So how do you find your baseline? So what's your starting point of assessment? Who's in your sampling group? So which part of the target group are you assessing? And who do you compare them with? So who's your control group? It can be very hard to quantify your outcomes and impacts. As they are of a qualitative nature often and very subjective, you have to carefully choose your indicators. And they can vary from one project to another, so you have to adapt them accordingly. Last but not least, the whole social enterprise sector is very heterogeneous. There's a variety of organizations, objectives, approaches. So at the very end, be careful who you're comparing yourself with. How could you get started nevertheless? First of all, I recommend that you establish a realistic scope for your assessment. So start with selecting the appropriate framework or methodology. Be clear about what you are including and what not. So which activities are you assessing? What's the time period that you're assessing? Be realistic about the available resources that you have. Who will do it? When? How? What expertise does this person have? Second of all, be clear about your theory of change. So what are the hypotheses that you work with? What are the assumptions? How can you argue the link between cause and effect in your project? Engage your stakeholders. Stakeholder management is crucial. So ask them about their views on what's important in impact assessment. How do they perceive the changes that occur? Select SMART indicators. Look at the ones that have been used in other projects. Carefully combine qualitative as well as quantitative indicators. And last but not least, manage your impact accordingly. So use your impact assessment to really develop a more impactful, more effective social organization. Thank you for listening.